All right, welcome back. We are COMP123 in the summer 2020 semester, and it's week 9, part 1 of our broadcast. I'm going to get into handling events and a couple of additional controls today, but for the first thing I'd like to do is talk about your new assignment that I've actually put up on eCentennial. It's assignment 4. It's one of my favorite ones that I do, and I do it cross-platform, so I do it on iOS and Android as well when we do those courses. I'm going to show you this assignment right now. So this one is my famous BMI calculator app, and it's due week 11. That's 2 short weeks from now on August 7th. That's Friday, August 7th at midnight. It's out of 100 points, 10%. Again, every time I look at an assignment like this and it says 10%, my thoughts are maximum 10 hours of work. Okay, and that means like from start to finish, design, documentation, and even submission is included in this 10%. So all the stuff that I've asked you to do. So what you're going to do is you're going to make your own Windows form application. All right, you're going to create a BMI calculator app. It allows the user to enter their weight, so some kind of text entry, and height. Okay, so those are the 2 things that you need for BMI. And whether they're when they're entering these values, they can choose between imperial or metric, so they can switch between units, and that'll give us some challenge when it comes to your user interface. And then it calculates the display as the user's body mass index, and you want to use this formula right here that I've included in the assignment. So that's what it does. So body mass index, it's actually a thing, of course, for people who know. If you look at the Department of Health, they basically say that, I guess this is in the United States, they basically say that a normal body weight is body mass index is between 18.5 and 24.9 points. That's what it is. Again, it's height over weight, right? That's how it works. Weight over height. That's what it is. Weight over height. Weight in kilograms over height in meters, or weight in pounds over height in inches. All right, so that's the calculation. So, and by the way, I mean it's skewed a little bit. If you're someone who's very muscular, obviously you might have a higher BMI than normal. You might be in this where it says overweight category, but actually you may not be overweight. Just might be muscular. So it's not exactly without its flaws. And they've modified it since this. They've got other factors here, for example, age and a bunch of other stuff that tells you where you should be. And if you're from a gender perspective, female and male, but we're going to keep it simple, and we're going to just make a calculation. So it's a little calculator that you're going to be making. It's a single form application, so it's not going to be multiple forms this time around. This is we may have one more assignment after this. Although these are supposed to be worth 10%, I may make another one. Just so that way we can spread the love out a little bit. If you're not doing well on one assignment, then you'll have a chance to make it up with the other one. So the way it works is it's out of 100 points. The first part is you're going to modify the following properties of the BMI calculator form. So I've given you a bunch of properties to modify. So I've made it so that the form itself is 320 by 480. All right, so that means that it's not a full-size form. It looks like an old-style iPhone or Android application. All right, so again, if I was to run Visual Studio, right, here we are with Visual Studio, and I want to make a new application, so I want to create a new project right here. Again, what you want to choose is from a platform's perspective, you want to go Windows, right? This is from last time. Project types, again, there's a whole pile of them. Desktop is where we want to go. Windows Form App is what we want to select, right? And then I'm just going to make this one. So we're going to start with this one today as I explain the rest of the assignment. So it's COMP123 in the summer 2020 semester, and it's lesson 9, part 1. Okay, well maybe we'll do lesson 9, part 2 on Wednesday when we get together. But that's what this does. Okay, so now again, I've updated my machine, so you're looking at me with the new machine, so there might be some changes that you might see compared to last time. So when I make this application, So I drag it over here. Of course, it's not where I want it to be, but anyways, it is what it is. So what I mean by that is, remember, you need to rename this form to the proper thing, so you change this to BMI form. What you want to do is when you click here on the right, these are all your properties like we talked about over the last couple of weeks, right? So for example, the properties of your, I'm going to hide this one too. The properties of your form are going to be all right here. And what you want to do is you want to start with your resolution, your size. So obviously this is way too big. You reduce this. I'll give this to you for free. 320 by 480, right? So when you do that, you have a very limited size of a form. And this is going to present a challenge to you because you're going to try and fit in your controls in here. And one of the things that you're going to see is some of the controls are going to be fairly small. And by the way, back in the day when people were designing mobile applications, they only had this viewport size to work with, which was very, very challenging. All right, so again, this is going to be your viewport size, 320 by 480 for the form. Okay, some people have in the past have submitted a form with the wrong size and they've lost marks. So please make sure it's 320 by 480. Okay, and a bunch of other sizes. Font size is the big one, 20 points. All right, so how can you fit 20-point font size on a 320 by 480 form? People are going to ask that question, and you're going to have to do some things to do that. Also, form border style, it says fixed dialog. Again, we haven't covered that, but really what it is if you go to form border style here, there's different options that we talked about before. One of them is fixed dialog, so you're going to pick that one. If I pick that one for you, just for a second to show you the difference, it just changes the form. So if I was to run this thing again, you can see that I don't have controls, right? So I don't have any kind of controls in terms of resizing of the form, but and it looks like it's borderless. That's what fixed dialog kind of looks like, right? So that's why I'm asking you to make it that your form like that. Okay, so that's the options here. Maximum box will be, false. As an example, your start position will be in the center screen, and all the regular stuff. There's also, it tells you about laying out your form. You're going to use something called the table layout panel. I'm going to go over that today. What's a table layout panel? How do you use that? And all that kind of stuff. Radio button, we've talked about checkbox. Radio button is similar. It's a toggle. It can kind of make it so that it's on or off, but between two different choices, let's say, or several choices. And I'll show you how to do that too. So these two I'm going to cover today to make sure you guys know how to do that. Labels you know how to do. Text boxes you know how to do, as an example. But basically what you're going to be doing is if you enter your if we look at another BMI calculator online, and you can look for examples of applications online to help you, because you're going to design this thing. So if I go BMI calculator and I look at images, right? If I go app, BMI calculator app, then you're going to see different options here. So here's a very simple one, all right, where you have weight, and now you see these controls that can actually increase or decrease your weight. I asked you for some kind of controls to allow you to, to enter your weight and your height. And whoever designed this one is interesting because what they've done is they've limited user input, where you plus or minus. You start with some kind of weight on the left, as an example. Maybe you can even type it in. But what it does is it reduces the chance for error when you do it this way. Right? Because if you remember the biggest problem with user interfaces is the user, right? When they enter stuff in, they can mess you up, right? They can enter an A instead of a 1 or something, and that could really screw things around. So you don't want that to happen. What you want is to limit the user to what they can do, and it makes it simpler for them when it comes to entering their results. There's other examples where they also take in age as an example, but you can use some of these as a guide, like to remake them. You're not going to, copy somebody else's stuff. You can just use these as a guide. There's other options that they will present you. Here's another one where you have some kind of slider control. That I'm not sure I like this one a lot because of sliders generally don't have a lot of precision when it comes to where you stop the slider. I like the stepper, like up plus and minus a little bit more. That kind of idea is better. in my opinion. But you can see here that you have here a multi-form application, so 2 forms, and this is an Android app, obviously. But it doesn't really matter. We're going to emulate what it's like to make a little app on our desktop, and it's going to be like a little calculator. Okay, so that's what we're doing. So you can get some ideas of what I'm looking for. It tells you the details, you know, in terms of what I'm asking for here. Solution structure is worth 6 points, so please don't discount this. 6 points out of 100. So make sure you call it BMI calculator form. People don't do this kind of stuff for whatever reason. They leave it as form 1. That's a mistake, guys. I'm sorry. Also, you want to make sure you follow the convention that we're going with control names. So control name, for example, my welcome, and then the control type, button, welcome button, right? That's how you would do it, or calculate button, BMI button. Whatever the thing would be, would have to be like this. Okay, please don't start off with BTN space or whatever, anything like that. It's got to be in this format. If you don't give me this format, you'll lose 2 marks. Okay. Private class member variables with an underscore, please, or an M underscore is okay as well. In internal documentation, you're going to put your name and your student number and all that kind of stuff in the code behind file of the form, as well as your program.cs file. It's got to be up on GitHub as normal, and you're going to make a short video for me so I can mark you, and it won't kill me to mark you. All right, which is something you should be doing for assignment 3, which is due this Friday at midnight. I'm also giving you some opportunities for optional marks, or I'll say bonus marks. Splash screen, so a second screen that displays for 3 seconds, and then finally displays your BMI app. It's got to look nice. Don't just give me a splash screen that's empty. I won't give you marks for that. Colorful progress bar that changes in proportion to the user's BMI. All right, so if your BMI is bigger, the progress bar is larger, and so on. Reset button that resets the screen. We didn't talk about how to do reset buttons. And instead of entering data for the user with a text box, number keys. So make it look like a calculator as opposed to something else. And I'll work with this one on you to give you that 6 bonus marks things over the next couple weeks, just so that way you know how to do number keys for a regular calculator as well. Okay, so that is the assignment. It's due, again, like I said, Friday, August 7th. You have a couple weeks to do it at midnight. I know it's coming at you fast and furious, but we're in an interesting semester this semester, right? So it's going to be good practice for you guys to get this done, and it'll solidify the things we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks in terms of UI and other things. Okay. Any questions around the assignment before we move on? I'm sure there are going to be questions, guys, because whenever I give an assignment, people are quiet, and then they look at the assignment and they're like, what did he want here? What was he asking for? It's going to happen again, guaranteed. All right, so let's just minimize this, and we'll take questions after. So that's your assignment. Again, just to keep in mind that the other one is due this Friday at midnight. Okay. So now we're going to be talking about handling events a little bit in a second, but before we get to this PowerPoint, and this PowerPoint's more for reference than anything else. It talks about how to handle events, what are events, and so on in here. I want you guys to know about it for your final test, right, in terms of, because there will be a final test in this course. So let's get to it in terms of everything else. So if I bring up Visual Studio, and unfortunately, again, I had to reinstall because I'm running a brand new system, which is good, but it always causes me a bit of consternation whenever I do that. So again, let's suppose instead of making a BMI calculator, I'm going to make a regular calculator. So I'm going to right click here, and I'm going to rename my form. So if you could open this up with me, I've just got a regular kind of Visual Studio project here, and I've named it Lesson 9 Part 1, and what I'm doing is I'm going to rename my form to calculator. Let's make a regular calculator. Calculator form.cs. So it's not a BMI calculator, it's a calculator, all right, which is actually more challenging to do, to be honest. All right, so that's the calculator. I've got my form. I've got things a little bit arranged like this. And what I'm going to do for the form itself is in here, I'm going to go and change the title. So the title bar like we've done before. So it's going to be the text tag, which is instead of form 1, we're going to call this calculator. I will say calculator form. There we go. All right, so there's a calculator form. And if I run this thing, right now it goes in the top left corner of my window, which is not cool. What I really want to do instead is where it's going to show up again, if you guys remember, is the start position. So you're going to change the start position to center screen, and when I run it again, then bam, it's going to be in the center screen. Okay, wow, that's way faster than my other computer. So anyways, that's the way it would work. Okay. Now this is a great spot to put it up on GitHub, and for the first time, I haven't done GitHub with this build, so this is a great time for me to configure my machine and all that kind of stuff as I would normally do. Okay, so that's the first thing. So whenever I do GitHub, again for the first time, I go to settings, and I'm going to go to global settings and make sure that this is correct. I also want to enable download of author images, which is also important, so I'm going to update that. Okay, that's the one thing I want to do. And once I've done this, I'm going to go home, I'm going to go to changes, and you can see that right now I can't do anything about this. Why? Because I haven't added this thing to source control. I've got to go back to Solution Explorer. One of the challenges people are saying is, I don't know why, but it won't push to GitHub. Well, did you ever add it to source control? You got to do that first. If you go to Solution, right click, and what you want to do is you want to go down here where it says Add Solution to Source Control, right? And what this does for us is it creates a Git repository in the background. Again, I'm reviewing this, I'm saying it again because people have been asking me about Git and GitHub. They're like, Professor, I really don't get how to do it. I'm getting blocked, all this other stuff. You can't get blocked unless you're putting it up to the wrong spot. Or if you're trying to put it in my repository, that won't work. You have to do your own. You can also recreate stuff that I've given you by just copying some of the information that I've given you here and putting it into your own document, right? So you can always recreate a form, and I'll talk about that too. You can actually copy paste stuff from one form to another. But for now, we have our initial Git repository, but we need to put it up on GitHub. So you can see if I go to changes, so if I go home changes, there are no changes because remember we just initialized our repository. So in order for me to push it now, I'm going to go to home, I'm going to go to sync, and if you've loaded things properly, you're going to have this publish to GitHub option. Go publish to GitHub. You can choose your account, which I've just done. You can also see that this is what it's going to look like online. So COMP123 M2020 lesson 9 part 1. That's my GitHub repository, and I'm going to click publish. That's enough right there to get things going. If I've done everything correctly, and I may not have, because remember this is a new install of Visual Studio 2019 and so on. Then I'm going to be good to go. So here, let's go up to GitHub now, and I'm going to look at things and see if I'm there. So there you are. There's my GitHub repository. Notice I do not have a README file, and I don't want to set one up ahead of time. If I did it the other way around, set up my GitHub repository here, and then added a README for whatever by accident, I would never be able to push to my Git repository because my README would block me from doing so. Because my README is different, I would have different stuff on GitHub repository compared to what I have locally. You want to synchronize, that's what sync is about, to make sure that both the GitHub repository and your local repository are the same. Okay, if you don't make them the same, you can't push. That shouldn't be a problem if you follow my way of doing things. If you go through Visual Studio and do it this way, you won't have a sync problem. But if you do something like you create your repository first and then try and connect to it because you don't have your Git extension, well, that's on you, guys. I don't know what else to tell you from that perspective. Okay, so I push it up to GitHub, and I've got my form ready to go. We've been working on this thing, but I want to add some buttons, and you know how it's been going, right? If I go to Toolbox, I've been eyeballing, as an example, how to put different buttons on the screen, right? I've been kind of saying, well, I want to put this button on the screen, so I just drag and drop it, and I'm going to use my eye to kind of figure out where it's going to go. Yeah, that can be okay, but what if I want to add a bunch of buttons? So if I just do, remember, control drag, I can add many buttons as I want, right? And I want to make them aligned. As an example, how do I do that kind of stuff? Especially since I'm making a BMI application for my professor. How do I do this kind of stuff? It's going to look terrible, right? Maybe I need to group these buttons somehow, or I need to put them somewhere, you know, as an example. And there is a control that can help us. I'm just going to get rid of these buttons. It's from a container perspective, there's something called a table layout panel. Now this goes back to the old way of doing tables actually on HTML. All right, so I'm going to grab this table layout panel and drag and drop it in. This is a new control we're talking about today, so you haven't seen this one. But basically what it does, if you notice, it creates this like little grid, right? And I can expand it to fit a specific area. For example, I want all my buttons in my calculator to be down here, right? And if I'm going to make a standard calculator, by the way, the first thing you should always do in my course when we come to making applications, whether you're doing Android or one day you might be with me on iOS or something else, when we make Apple apps or Android apps, always make your user interface first, no code. Okay, so I'm not looking for any code at the beginning. Create your user interface, make sure it works, test it out, and all that kind of stuff, and then add code afterwards to your user interface. If you were to do it the other way around, you may have a problem. So here, I want to build a calculator, and I want to use a calculator that we know of, to make one. So you see we have a Windows calculator here that kind of looks like this, right? Now I'm using dark mode, so that's why it's looking pretty dark. But notice what it has. It has some kind of results area up here. And then I have these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 buttons here. So 12 in here, right? Plus maybe some kind of operator buttons over here and an equal sign. So there's lots of buttons here, right? I mean, you're going to have at least 12. Let's say, you know, if I was going to do it for, so let's say a 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows and 1, 2, 3, 4 columns, 5 by 4. We're talking about 20 buttons that I'm going to install, right? 20 at least, not including some extra buttons with different functionality like these ones, which are not required. These buttons are not required, right? Because, you know, I'm making a basic calculator, right? And maybe this plus minus button, as an example, maybe doesn't have to be here. It could be something else. But I'm going to lay out a 5 by 4 panel. And what you can do here with this this one here, this layout, right? And if I go back to my Solution Explorer here, right? You can see that by default, the table layout panel, which is a container, has a name that's table layout panel 1. Bad name, right? So we want to recall this thing this is the number button table layout panel. It's okay, guys, make a big name like this. I'd rather have a big name. This is number button table layout panel, so I know what it is, as opposed to something odd, something that is not going to show up, right? Or that doesn't make any sense. All right, so now that's the first thing. Now there's this little arrow. This is a new control, so we're going to focus on this little arrow here, which is a smart arrow, and it basically says I can add rows or add columns, but maybe what we want to do is do this thing here, which is edit rows and edit columns. And this is kind of neat. So remember I said it's like 5 rows by 4 columns is what I want, right? So I want to do rows. I want to click on rows. It's a little drop down that you can create rows. And notice the percent is 50-50. Well, that's going to change in a second, right? So what I want to do is I want to add in 3 more rows. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so there's 3 rows more. And if there's 5 rows and it's 100% I have to distribute, right? That means that there's 20% each. So this one has to change to 20% if I'm going to make it by percentage. I can also specify an absolute pixel ratio. I don't recommend that, but you could do that too. This one keeps it organized proportionally to your screen. So I can say I want exactly this much percent that I'm going to allocate for each of these areas. You're going to see what this is going to do actually. It's actually quite neat. All right, so now that I've got 20% for each of the rows, right? So I've done rows. And then I'm going to go to columns. All right, now I only have 2 columns. I need more than 2. I need 4 columns, so let's add a couple more. 4 columns, 100% divided by 4, again, obviously is not 50-50. It's 25 each. So let's do that. So we'll say 25 for each of these things, percentage-wise, right? So now what we're doing is we're partitioning our area down here so that it is equally laid out. 25, 25, 25. Okay, kind of interesting. Now again, could you do this without a table layout panel? You could, but it's not going to be as nicely laid out. So notice it's created a little grid pattern, and this is where I want to put my buttons. Okay. Are you with me? Are you doing this with me, or are you just watching? Some people are with me. Yay! Oh, that's fantastic. Guys, when I ask you if you're with me, don't use the chat if you don't mind. Just use the check mark. Das, is that a hand? That you have a hand, a question, or? Okay, Das, that's good. All right, thank you. Could I please show the size? What do you mean by please show the size of this thing here? Sure. If you want to do the exact size, it's 280 by 232 for this area right here. I might change though. Okay, so bear with me while I do this. The size of the form is 320 by 480. Remember, I'm going with that size I told you about, 320 by 480, to make it look like an old style iPhone or Android device, right? Not the long ones, the big ones now. It's an old Android device, or even an app that might work on a Windows, a Windows app, as an example. All right, so there we go. So we got our layout, we got some buttons, and some spaces, a slot, if you will, for buttons, and they're kind of rectangular. They're not really squarish. If I wanted to make it more square, you can see that I can increase the size of this thing, but then it would take up most of my area. Maybe that's okay if I have a little results area up here, if that's what I want to do, right? But for now, I wanted to show you if I was going to make it so it's like half the area is just this buttons for a second. What could we do? So that's one. The next thing I want to do is I want to use or create buttons. So I want to grab a button and I want to drag it inside of the control. Now notice that the control by default shows a button like this, and this will be the first button that I put in. So I'm going to go to the button. Now there's a couple of interesting things here. It says auto size false. If I go auto size true, right, that means the button is going to change to whatever inside of it, right? Remember, buttons. Auto size mode, it says grow only, grow and shrink. That's what that does. So this is two options. You can make it either grow or grow and shrink. So other options here. Cell 00 is where this button's at. It's interesting, isn't that? It tells you right away. And it says dock none, right? It also tells me I can dock it in a certain spot. I don't want to do that. I'm going to keep going. Flat appearance, right? With a border color and a border size of 1. So for the button itself, it's going to have a bit of a border, right? And then flat style is standard. You can choose a pop of different kinds of styles to make it look different. Okay, like we talked about, font is important. Remember I said that I want all my fonts for all my stuff to be 20. Let's make 20 the font size. Right away, we see that there's an issue now, right, with the button. It says but, right, which is not really good. For color, as an example, and let's make the for color white this time around. So I'm going to choose a white color. So again, I'm going to go to the web, and I'm going to go white. Okay, so it's going to make it like this. And I want my back color for most buttons to be blue, just to make a change. Okay, so where it says back color, I'm going to change the back color to a web. Under web again, I'm going to choose a blue color, just to make sure that, you know, we try different things out, not the same things. Deep sky blue is not bad. Maybe we'll call it Dodger blue. Dodger blue might be the right thing. Dodger blue, right? And we'll make sure that the text inside the button, if I scroll down, I want my text align, like it says here, to be middle center. That's definitely what I want, middle center for my text align. Okay. Now the text for the button, I want numbers, right? So I'm going to put the number 9 in here. 9 is a bigger number than 1. 1's kind of like a little bit slimmer, and I want to show what this looks like. 9, the button that's 9, the 9 button. By the way, if I drag this button around, it can snap. It'll snap to whatever one of these controls I throw it into, right? I'm not really being careful. I'm just like throwing it into a grid, and it's snapping in there. Again, my layout for buttons looks like this, right? So the 9 button, if I was gonna use the 9 button, would go here, okay? 7, 8, 9. And let's start with that. So we'll call this the 9 button. Not 9 as in 9, but 9 button. Okay, like this. Cool. Now I want to copy paste this 9 button. So copy and paste. So I want to kind of drag this button over, and this would be the 7 button. All right, 7 button. All right, and we'll change the number from 9 to 7. Not 7 plus, 7, right? Control drag, right? So I'm control dragging to make that copy, right? And make sure that all the buttons are named properly. 8 button. And so on, right? How about if I get all of these and control drag down? Can I do that? The answer is no, I cannot. But can I copy paste? Yes, I can, right? So I can copy paste. But notice where it copies and pastes, like up here. And if I copy paste again, so copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, it's going to try and fill in the entire grid with my buttons, which is totally fine. It's like a game now, not a calculator. But copy paste, it'll just copy all the buttons, and it's all in all the places. We're going to get back here and fix these, but I'm going to start with these ones. So 7, 8, 9, we did 7, 8, 9, right? You can see that's 7, 8, 9. These other buttons are just called buttons, button 5, whatever. So this one is going to be 6. So let's just change everything first when I'm making my calculator. Now this is not your extra. This is like, actually, is it 6? No, 6. It's 4, 5, 6. This should be 4. Again, get confused, look at your guide. Look at your reference. 5, 6, and then 1, 2, 3. I'll go and rename the buttons in a second. So the first part always is your layout. Lay out your buttons or the controls as you see fit. Now, here, as an example, in our view, we have a 0 and we have a dot. So here's our 0 button, and we have our decimal point here, right? So again, just go in there and change it to decimal. All right, dot. I want to leave this button blank for a second. So just erase the text just for a second there. And then if we look at our design, typically what we have is we have a equals here. So here's our equals. Equals is an operator, right? We have an operator. These are operands. These are operators up here, right? So we have a bunch of them. We have divide. That's going to be interesting to do. Divide, multiply, subtract, and add, right? And that's going to start up here. Divide is going to start up here. So again, text-wise, can I? I'm going to use the slash as a placeholder, but I'm going to replace this later on with something else. All right. So multiply, right? And instead of multiply being a star, I'm going to make it an X. Right. So multiply, and let's make it a big X. So star X, and then just like it says here, subtract and plus. So subtract and plus. Now you can see that we're going to have some issues. Some of these are not laid out exactly the same. Maybe X is too big. Maybe I'll make that smaller. There we go. I think that looks nicer. And I want to change the color of these buttons, but I want to change them all together. So I'm going to control click each of them. Control click each of these buttons, right? And I'm going to make all of these buttons green. So what you can do is you can do a bunch of controls at once. Where my background was Dodger blue, I'm going to change the background to some other kind of greenish color. And again, let's just skim through this to find something that makes more sense. that's not too glaring and ugly. Something like a, I don't know, like a regular green might be okay. And if not a regular green, we can try a lime green. No, it's too much. How about sea green? That's more subdued. I think I might want to do sea green, which is more subdued than how it was before. All right, so that's pretty cool. I've got this, and I've got some buttons along here, right? And again, my design is gonna be slightly different than the design we see. I need some kind of backspace button, right? That's for sure. Now I could add additional buttons like we have here, right? But I want to have my backspace button kind of here, like a backspace, right? So we're going to use the back arrow for this, and then a couple of additional buttons up here. Like for example, our calculator is not going to have 1 over x or x to the 2, you know, as an example. It's not going to have, 2 root x. We're not going to have this one, which is square root. It's just going to have a reset button and a back button. So back button will be here. For now, we're just going to use a left arrow. I'm going to replace this in a second, okay? So some kind of, oops, that's not what I wanted. So this is going to be down here, a left arrow that kind of looks like this. Maybe we'll make it single. So it looks like this, a left arrow, some kind of left. We're going to fix this in a second. This is just a placeholder again from what we're doing. And then some kind of clear button, right? Which is going to be, this is a backspace pretty much. And this is going to be a clear button. I want to make one button that spans two slots right here. One button that spans 2 slots. And the way I can do that is to remove one of these buttons. So take away one. And then what I want is for these 2 slots to be kind of together, right? Because you want to, sometimes you want to have slots that are more than one, right? So I want to span more than one spot, right? Now we're inside, one thing that we know is that we're inside of a cell. Whenever we're inside of a cell, the buttons know, or the controls know, that they're inside of a table view cell, right? Something like that, right? So what we want to do is where it says cell column span, you can go to column span 2, right? And what this will do is it'll try and span the button so that it's twice as long. So if I move this back, let's undo that change, right? I can make it so that it spans 2 cells now. The 9, it looks like a 9, but actually what we're going to do is we're going to make it the clear button, right? So we'll say clear. Okay. And these controls here should be green, the same sea green as the other ones. So I'll say instead of Dodger blue, we can make it sea green again, right? So we'll go to sea green just to make it the same kind of look and feel, right, as we're designing our little app. So clear button. And what I want to do is, again, I want to modify my my controls. I want to make a big 0 button, right, just to fill in the space. So 0 will be like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So again, I want to get rid of this one, and I want to span this one over here. And then what I want to do in our design, because we're designing a different calculator, I want to make column span of 2, right? And now I can just span it over, so it looks like it's 2 columns, right? So this is my layout. Again, this is my default, and now I need to rename all the buttons that I have. So again, I'm going to start with 0, and I'm going to go to the top, and this is going to be called the 0 button, right? This is the decimal button. That's what it is. This is the equals button. Yeah. Equals button. Not butto, button. One button. I'm just specifying, right? So we know what to do. Whenever we say in our kind of standards, what we're doing here is we're putting together something that makes sense. I know I've seen other standards where they do the name of the control first, followed by the identifier name, but I like it this way more. And this is the plus button. Okay, 4, 4 button. This is one you can't do automatically. You have to kind of do it one by one. 5 button. 6 button. Now you don't have to do this, and I'll show you why later, but you'll see what it is. This is the minus button. 7, 8, 9, and this is the multiply button, or multiply button. Multiply. You could also say times, right? But clear button. It's the backspace button. Backspace. And this is the divide button. All right, that's pretty cool. We've got some good stuff in here in terms of how this works. And let's just try the layout. Again, it's not perfect. It's just, so I got some placeholders here. I got a placeholder here. We're going to replace that. I got a placeholder here. We got to replace that. But what about if we run it? What will it look like? It looks pretty good, actually, right, in terms of where the buttons are laid out in my controls, right? Are you with me? I got some check marks. I got a lot of blanks. You know, hopefully you guys are not just check marking, but actually doing what I'm asking you to do to practice. This is what this is all about. You know, so you can get your stuff done. Some people aren't responding, but that's on you guys. I mean, this is your course just as much as mine. All right. All right. So yes. So what about if I want to get another control? Remember, I can paste in here, inside of here, anything I want, right? It's a big area, big text area, right? So I want to insert. It's almost like I want to insert, you know, stuff. So it would be nice if we had some kind of insert, or insert a symbol or something like that, or insert the, you know, some kind of map, a character map, maybe, that we have in Windows, something like that looks like this, character map. If you actually look up character map, that's all I did. I went character map. It's on Windows. Everyone has that if you're Windows. You're on Windows operating system, and you see that there's a lot of different characters here that we can have, right? If I scroll down, you can see that it's covering my default font, Arial. All right, that is not the font that I'm using right now. I'm using Microsoft Sans Serif 20 point. Right? That's what these are right here. So be careful, be cognizant of that you want to match the font. You can also change to whatever you want, but if you go MS Sans Serif, right, Microsoft Sans Serif, you'll see that these are the symbols that are available in MS Sans Serif, Microsoft Sans Serif. And there's a lot of weird symbols here too. So we're going to have to change our font to make sure that these ones are going to turn out the way we want them to. Why? Because we're probably going to use something like a Wingdings or something like that. Let's take a look at Webdings and Wingdings. Webdings gives you a lot of more symbols. I know it's kind of hard to see this on your screen because you're looking at this, but Webdings, it gives you things like arrows, you know, all kinds of stuff. Remember, you can paste anything in here as long as you match the font inside of your controls. Okay, so this is not good. Webdings. What about Wingdings? Right, you see there's some numbers like 1, 2, 3, and there's some arrows. There's some other bigger arrows. There's also these arrows. Not bad. Oh, there's one, a character code, which looks like a backspace. That's kind of one I want, right? This is the one. I want that one there. So I want to select that one. I need to move this one to Wingdings. So this character, this here, instead of having Microsoft Sans Serif, in order for me to use this font, I need to move this to Wingdings. So we're going to do that. We're going to go to the font type. I'm going to move to Wingdings. By the way, everyone should have this. Wingdings. Yay. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to here. And instead of this symbol, I'm going to copy this. Copy. And then see if this will accept this kind of paste. And see what happens. And the answer is no. It does not. Okay. I mean, I tried, right? I went to Wingdings, And I tried to paste it in there, right? But it didn't work. Why? Because remember what it's trying to do. What are these things really? They're not, I mean, whenever we make fonts in a button, we're translating the glyph into a rasterized version of text. That's what this is happening, right? And the conversion that's happening here with Wingdings, it's not working, is what I'm saying, right? So, and if I try something else, like if I go to like Wingdings 2, or it doesn't matter what I try, some other kind of thing, that symbol that comes up is not going to work. Okay, I'm saying sometimes it just won't. Right, so it's a nice idea that we had to try this, Wingdings 2, Wingdings 3, right? It could also mean that notice if I change the font as I'm going, I can scroll up and change different fonts, and you can see that all of them have that funny symbol up there, right, for the Wingding. Okay, so let's just go back down to Wingdings, which is what I want. And you can try other symbols, because the character only covers one. Let's try something else, like this one. So let's say select that one, and I get rid of this one, and see what happens. Can I do a Unicode character like this from a Wingdings perspective? This one. Again, I'm gonna select this one, copy it, and then if I go back to here, let's see what I get here. Do I actually get that symbol? And the answer is no. Right, so there's limitations on what you can do here, unfortunately. Like you can't paste in whatever you want in the symbol, right? Even if I paste it in here, and if I press enter, right, it won't matter. It'll still convert it to something that it understands. So what is the solution for this? I want a backspace, and I want a proper divide symbol. How about divide? Is that something that exists somewhere? And again, if I look here in Wingdings, maybe not. What about in Microsoft Sans Serif, which is where we want to go? So again, I want to go to Microsoft, right, or MS Sans Serif, which is right here. Okay. And is there a symbol that exists for me that I can use, right? For example, I have this character code plus, right, which is what I use, and the hashtag or the /, right, as an example. Is there a divide somewhere that you can see that we can use? Because this would be the best. If we can find a division symbol right here in our code, that would save us a lot of trouble, right? The other thing you might want to try and do is, again, there are other fonts. We could try and use Wingdings again. Sometimes they work. Like, to be honest with you, they do work in terms of what we can see here. If I go to Wingdings again, and if you look, there are going to be other symbols here. There are going to be other symbols here for that we need, for example, right? So, example, these are all arrows, and everything else is really cool, but I want to be able to grab some kind of mathematical symbols here, right? So let's see if there's any kind of math or symbol font. Symbol font's also another one. Sometimes symbol font works in this thing. So, so you can see that there's several different kinds of symbols. What we want is a divide, if we can find it, right? And we have a plus minus, right? We have an equals, and we have all these other ones. But I don't see a divide. So it's kind of like, you know, limitations on what we can do. Plus, minus, hashtag, or the slash, I mean. But we don't have a divide, right? At least, oh, there it is. There's my divide. Let's select that one. Okay, and copy it. And let's see if it actually takes this one. This is symbol font. Okay, so again, I'm going to go here and paste it in. And you can see that that is the actual font. If I change that to from MS Sans Serif to symbol, again, symbol is one we hope that it will take. Because remember, this is an older program too, right? Hey, that looked okay. Symbol worked. So if symbol works for the divide, how about the multiply? They might have a multiply that looks better than this one does. So let's go back to the multiply sign, the X, this one. I will select that one. I will copy that one. And I will put that in there as well as a symbol. that's slightly different than what we have here. So I'm going to go to my MS Sans Serif, and I'm going to go there and change that to symbol. There we go. Actually, that looks way more balanced than what I had before, right? Divide, multiply, minus. I want to get rid of this one. Maybe we have a backspace and symbol that I can use. So let's change this Webdings. Instead of Wingdings, let's go to symbol. I'll actually type it in. Symbol. There's symbol. It got something going on there. Look at that. It actually does a symbol. It's not exactly what I was looking for, but it did do something. Maybe there's something we can use in symbol that does a backspace too, right? And then we're going to be good. Golden, actually. So let's see. We have this one, which is kind of a forward back, right? And we do have a back arrow. This one. That's a back arrow. It's not a fat back arrow. Oh wait, there's one. There's a fatter back arrow. That can look probably okay. You know, it's not perfect by any means. It's not looking like what I wanted to have, a backspace. But it is a back arrow. And it is better than what we have. So let's see if I can select this one. Select. Okay, I want to copy it. I'm going to go back in here and paste it. And yeah, I got a back arrow. So that's not bad. That's not a terrible solution, right? By the way, if you guys are upset, let's say you make a mistake. Here's something. You're liking this, but then you're like, 0, you know, it'd be nice if we had a plus minus. Sometimes I want to do a negative, right? And I can't do a negative here. It's not allowing me to do negative. So I want to change this back to a single column, right? So I go back to single column. And remember how we did this? We say column span is what you want to do. Column span 1 instead of column span 2. Then we can pull this back over. It's still the 0 button. Made a mistake. Go back over. And now I want to make another one. I want to put one in there. So I want to kind of control drag, right? I want to control drag just by clicking one in here. And this button here will be the plus minus button. Plus minus button, right? Plus minus. And let's make this plus minus. So it looks like a plus minus. So is there a plus minus in my font? So I'm going to go back to symbol. Let's change this to symbol. Symbol looks like it's going to work. And let's change the symbol. So again, I'm using the character map again. And I'm going to try and find a plus minus that works. Here's one. There's that plus minus. I'm going to select that, copy it, and then go back down to the text area here and put it in. And see how that looks. Does that look okay? Yeah, the answer is looks pretty cool, right? Plus minus, it's got a plus minus. It looks like it's good. Awesome, we're building up our app very nicely. We've got our buttons ready to go. Hey, this is a perfect time to put it up on GitHub, right? So I'm going to go to changes, right? And I'm going to go, you notice that there's only one change to the calculator form designer. That's one thing we've asked. We've topped it. We didn't do anything on the CS side. No code yet. Just on the buttons. And I'm going to enter a message, a friendly message for the commit. This is the thing that's changed. Here's my commit message, which is my message that I'm attaching to the snapshot, right? Let's try it out. Let's put the snapshot as added number buttons to the form, right? So commit all, right? And then I'm going to go home, sync, and push. And that's going to push everything out to GitHub. By the way, just to add GitHub to our, if you are coming in late, or as an example, you ran behind and you wanted to start from where I'm starting, and you know I was too fast for you, you can always go and grab your code from GitHub, right? So what I'm going to do is whenever you share your GitHub repo, you want to share this link up here. So copy this link, and then I'm going to put this inside of our lessons. I'm going to say here's a link, and we'll say GitHub link for week 9, and then you guys have that link now up on eCentennial so that you can always follow along while I'm doing my crazy stuff. Okay, so GitHub link for Wingdings. Okay. Yeah, our calculator is looking pretty okay from a buttons perspective. There's still no functionality. Now, let's see what else we're missing on our calculator. There's some special buttons. I'm not adding those in. But there's also this area here. And this would be like the results box, if you will. Now, there's some options that we have for the results box. One thing we could use is we could use a text box. That's an option, right? But text box allows input. The other option we can do is use a label, right? But label only allows output, and it looks terrible. It looks like a label. However, the great thing about using a label is there's no chance that somebody could add input into my label ever, right? And the label only allows output. That might be a way to go. The other way to do it is use a text box, but disable it. So don't allow any input. It's, as an example, it's disabled. Now the problem with disabling is it looks weird, right? So let's try a text box first. I'm going to pull a text box in here. And now you're going to say, wait, Tom, the text box, unfortunately, it kind of is really slim. It's different size than these things. Shouldn't we have made an extra row in here as opposed to the number of rows we have? Should we not have made an extra row? And then I'm going to say to you, you know what? That's not a bad idea to make an extra row, but I forgot. Oh my God, how do I modify my layout after I made it? Well, let's go in here, and it says I can add rows here, right? Or I can edit rows here. Remember, I can add a row. If I add a row, where is it going to add it? It's going to add it at the bottom, right? So I really don't want that. Okay. So I want to go to edit rows and columns again. One thing is that you notice that the rows and columns, right, are kind of in a row, and they don't really, there's no name for the rows and columns. I want to insert a row at the top, right? Here's my insert at the top. So I inserted the row. I clicked on the row that I wanted and inserted at the top. And now it can't be 20%, guys. If I'm going to go with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows, so I'm going to put this row at the top, it cannot be 20, right? I want it to be, if I'm going to make it equal size, so something that looks like this, as an example, then I need to do some calculations with my calculator. All right, so I have 100%, and I want to divide it by 6 rows. So they're each roughly around 16.666%. 16.6%. And if I multiply that out, that's a kind of a weird number, right? It's not a really nice number at all. So what if I made these rows all 15%? What would I get? So I said 5 times 15. 5 times 15 is roughly 75. That means these ones would be worth 75, and this one would be 25, right? If I made them all things. So 25% is quite of a big, it's like almost like a whole much bigger area. But that makes sense because look at my area here. It's kind of bigger than these ones, right? So I can do that too. I can rebalance things the way I like. So let's make this one 25%. And then make all these, I can highlight them all. Let's make them 15%. Right? So that's kind of make it a lot nicer, right? And you might say, well, Tom, I can't see anything, but you can make it, this is the great thing about doing this, you can make it kind of do one of these, right? So you can increase the size of everything. Spacing looks nice too. You can also reduce the spacing. We'll talk about that in a sec. But this is where I want to put my results text box, and I want it to span all these rows, right? So let's put my text box back in here. Here's my text box. And what I want to do is where it says column span, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. So I want a column span 4. And I also don't want where it says, so one thing that this does is it says it accepts tab, allows drop and anchor, autocomplete, and it has sizes, right? I remember I can't really, I can change the size this way, so it kind of spans the entire column, but I can't really change the size this way. Now I could change the text size, so I can make this like 20 points. That will help. There's 20 points, but I've got the space in here because, well, it's not that great. The other thing is that from a layout perspective, like this thing that's got to be laid out, row span is 1. It says text align, visible is true, but I want it to be disabled, right? So I don't want anyone going in there. So for example, there is a read only box that makes it true, which makes it gray, right? That's what read only does. It kind of disables the box so I can only read from it. I want it white in the background like we had it, so I can go back to the back color, and instead of making it control, I can modify it and I can force it to be white. So it looks again like it's an active control. And for my fore color, we have to also make sure the fore color is not Windows text, but rather black, because otherwise it'll be some other color. Okay, so multi-line is false. We don't want multi-line. Read only we did. Maximum size, minimum size, lines as an array, and so on, right? So here's a font, and here's enable or disabled. A cursor is an I-beam, but should it be an I-beam? Should I go in there and try and, if I was to run this thing, I'll show you what it's going to look like. It's going to look like this. Do I want it to show that I'm in there and I'm like, you know, being able to type in here? And the answer is no, I don't want that. I want the cursor to show like a cursor, right? Like a regular cursor. So one thing you can do is you can modify the cursor for this thing so it can look different when you hover over it. So instead of I-beam, you can choose an arrow. So now when I run this thing on the cursor, it doesn't look any different. So it's not like looking like I can type in there or not, right? Here it looks like I should be able to click. Here it looks like I can click as well. So you can modify the cursor. Border style is fixed 3D, right? It has an autocomplete if I want to. Anchor is top and left. Anchor is where it's anchored, again, to the top left corner. That's where it starts to draw from. That's what it means. And for the most part, that's what it does. Okay. Border style fixed 3D, right? There's also fixed single. Okay, fixed single. Character casing allows you to make it uppercase if you like, right? And so on. Right, so I just wanted to show you this is one option that we can use as an example, but right to left. Oh yeah, text align. Text align is interesting. Text align really should be to the right, right? Because we want our options to go there. Like if you look at a calculator, the calculator numbers are here, not on the left, which is by default where it is, right? Okay, so that's one thing it does. But one thing we don't have, like notice it says I can choose multi-line, right? If I want to, I can put that up there. But one thing I don't have here is I don't have these little handles to make this like the whole size, right? I don't have that. And I can't also, notice I just messed it up. Notice that I can't like kind of put this in the middle the way it is right now, right? So that's the text box tasks, right? But I can do some, when I edit rows and columns, I can't really do much else in here in terms of that. And by the way, if I was to have another text box, and I'm going to rename this in a second, let's put the text box up here somewhere, right? So here's a text box. Notice the difference between this text box and the other one. This one doesn't have rows and columns, right? So this one and this one are slightly different. Because this one is inside of a layout and this one's not, there's extra controls that the layout has. So border style is the same. I'm just looking at another one as an example. This is the other option we would have. Take it out of there, right? Margin, minimum size and maximum size, multi-line, password characters, read only, true, scroll bars, and a size, right? Size. Notice I can't modify the height again. I can't go like 50. doesn't work because it goes back down to my my alignment, how big this thing is from a size perspective. So I'm just showing you that this is one option, right, in terms of how it can work. Okay, and that's this thing. Okay, so what about if I didn't use this? It looks nice, but I'm never going to input there anyway. So what if I don't do that and I use a label instead? So let's get rid of this. And here's what the text box looks like. But I'm going to get rid of this too. Okay, and let's add a label instead. So here's a label. We're going to put this in the top left corner. So there's my label. It looks like a label now, which is not really what I want, right? But. First of all, let's make some placeholder text. So we'll put a placeholder of 0 in here. So there's the 0 button, the 0 results label, the result label, right? And I can go in there and put in a value of 20. Okay, so that's the size that I want. And there is this auto size anchor to true. I can change this to false. Now I have way more control than I did before, right? So look at this. I want to span this multi-column. I can go column span 4, right? So I can span this, you know, kind of right across. So this is where the span is. I can make it so it's a text align to the, first of all, I want to make it the center right, center right. So this right over here. I can make it bigger than 20 because I have a lot of room now. So let's say I want to make this something like, you know, 40 points. So that's kind of something that looks like more of a calculator type. I can change the background, my back color. I can go to white, right? There's my white back color, right? I can also change it, make it a border style, so I can make it look like a text box, right? And it's already black on the front, but I want to make sure I don't want to trust the system to give me the right color. So I want to do the foreground by myself. Whenever I do text controls, I want to control the color. So I want to make it white or black, I mean, for the text color to be explicit. Okay. Now, if you see what this looks like, it looks like this, right? So not bad. And the great thing about this is if I was to go to take the actual container and stretch it, it's pretty good in terms of how it stretches, right? So it kind of squeezes everything out or whatever, right? That's what it does. So if I want to make it like this, I can attempt to change the size of my buttons and everything so it's more reasonable. So it takes up the entire space, right? That's why you put it in a layout, because if I can do it, I can crunch it down and change the size of my buttons this way if I want to make a smaller area, or I can make it a big area like this. Okay? So let's make it a bigger area so I can make it kind of like this. Then I can make my buttons bigger, right? Where they can span the right size. And if I know the size of them, like if I do 1, and if I say the size is the height of my area, size is 56, then I know all of these have probably going to be 56 as well. So I can kind of select all these buttons here, and I can go to a size of 56 and try that out, right? See how that looks. So size. Now, one thing to note is that they're slightly different. Let's go back to this one for a second. This one is 64 by 56. So can I do the same thing? If I multiply, if I kind of grab all this, 64 by 56. I kind of grabbed the other ones by accident. Let's see if that, I can do that. Oh, that's a little different. But this one is good. So 64 by 56. I can do all those at the same time. How about these ones? 64 by 56. Looks like it likes, okay, up to there. Doesn't like the bottom one for some reason. But these ones, I can do 64 by 56. So kind of make that calculator good. Okay, let's try, how about these ones horizontally? Yeah, it kind of does those too. 54 by 56. There we go. 64 by 56. So there's there. So we have our layout, our new layout for the calculator. And again, running it is also good because it kind of looks like it's supposed to look. It looks nice. And we have our UI. That's my UI for my calculator. Okay. One thing I also don't want is I don't want to maximize, because if I did that, then, well, it would look like this, and that's no good, right? So we don't ever want maximize to even work, right? So what I want to do instead is I want to say my maximum for the form itself, the maximize box should be turned to false, which is what I've asked you to do actually for your assignment as well. Okay, so there we go. And so you can't modify it now. So now it's there. I can't modify the size. The buttons are all should be clickable, right? And this area here I can't do anything with because it's a label. Actually, it looks like some kind of text area, but it's not. It's a trick, right? Cool. All right. So that's the first part. Now let's put this up on GitHub. So I'm going to go to Solution Explorer, and I'm going to go to Team Explorer. I'm going to go to Home. I'm going to go to Changes. And notice there's only one thing that's changed, calculator form. I'm going to say completed UI, right, which is what I did. Commit all, Home, sync, and push. And that should push everything up on GitHub for you. So you can always start from here. Worst case scenario. So again, some things to go over. I used the character map in order for me to get these other symbols. Someone said I could use an image. You could certainly use images here instead. All these images instead of buttons. Images are going to run you a little bit hotter in terms of memory usage. But for a little UI like this, you can use characters. Character fonts are much cheaper in terms of memory utilization than images. So you want to go low when it comes to making an app anyway. All right, so how will the thing work? Well, if I press clear, it's going to go to 0. And then if I press the numbers, then what will happen is I want it to perform just like this. Now, there's some tricks to make this work. When I press backspace, it's going to be, going back, but I want all these buttons to do something, right? Every one of these buttons I want to touch here are going to do something similar to what I've got in my example. This is my reference, right? I already have a kind of a thing that works. So what do I do here? How do I make it? Do I make one button, one event handler? What do you think? So I have to make like, what do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. 19 buttons. I have to have 19 event handlers, right? For all these buttons. And this is now to the subject of what we're going to in here, handling events, which is how do events work in the first place, right? What are events, right? Again, an event is something that happens when an object is modified somehow. And what does that mean is if I hover over an object, you guys should be doing a little bit of this in your JavaScript class as well. When you hover over a button on the web, you get some kind of hover effect, right? As an example, one thing that says UI is event driven, so the program is driven by events, right? So it drives the program to perform a task. Same thing with JavaScript online. You click on something, you scroll down. Anything you do with your mouse on a web page or in an app is something that's causing an event to trigger, we say. Sorry, I'm just looking at my heat. An event to trigger. That's what happens, right? So we have something that triggers the event, and then we have some kind of event handler. We can say that the event has been raised, fired, or triggered. That is kind of the naming convention we're using. But the event handler is some kind of method that handles the event. All right. So here we have a couple of controls as an example. When we change the label, we kind of did this. One of our first examples was this. I want to click the button and it changed the label. We did that like day 1 almost, right? And you can actually get what the event is. The sender is the thing that gives us the event, right? This is how you make the event like we talked about last time. I focus on the button. I add plus equals a new system event handler, right? And I specify the method that this event handler points to, or the event points to. Well, in this way, I could really create something called a shared event handler if I did this for my buttons, right? How can I make so that all the buttons share the same event handler? Okay. So let's go back to my Solution Explorer. And again, I click on the 7 button. Make sure that they're all labeled properly, 7 button and so on. And you can see that there is an events, like almost like a little lightning bolt that's here inside of my UI. Right, here's my little lightning bolt. So there's two. There's this one that's basically all the properties, and this one which is all the events. So I want to trigger the click event, right? Here's the click event. And I want to do it for one of the buttons. So I'm going to double click on, I'm going to double clicking on the 7 as an example. So double click. Again, remember what happens when you double click. When you double click, it creates this method, this private method that's 7 button click. 7 button doesn't make any sense. And I want to make it so that it's any button that's being clicked, a button click, right? So this is like calculator button click, right? Any button. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to rename this event, because you can rename it to whatever you want. Now it says rename 7 button, include comments, include strings, nah. Okay, so I'm going to just include this. I want to rename it so that instead of 7 button click, it's going to be named calculator button click. So calculator button click. Okay. And I don't know what happened there, but that's okay. All right. Calculator button click. Now remember that you got to test it. If this goes wrong like this, and let's say for example, that means it didn't rename properly, right? So undo. So I want to take this name and undo. Obviously the renaming didn't go so well, right? I want to refactor rename is what I want to do, right? And this is where C# ReSharper is better. But I'm going to do the same thing like we did here. I'm going to just rename. That hopefully it'll allow me to do that. And I can rename this button whatever I want. Calculator button click, like this, by typing in here before clicking apply. And then I click apply. And now if I go back to my calculator form, we're still good. Right? The thing is being renamed here. If you also want to do it manually, you can always go to the calculator form designer, right? And if you look inside of my Windows form designer generated code, notice like these are all these buttons. Now you can have a bunch of buttons that have been created. Look at all this. This is all the stuff that's been made for this. There's the 9 button, the 7 button, the 8 button. That's why it's important to name it properly, right? And you can see that the 7 button, right now, only the 7 button uses calculator button click. So you can I could have renamed it here too. Okay. But here's the trick. I want all of them to use calculator button click. I don't want just one of them. I don't want to make more than one of these, right? So how do I do that? Well, I can go to my calculator designer and I'm going to click all these buttons, right? Except for the 7, because 7s already have something, right? And if I click all these buttons once, by the way, and I'm control left clicking, control left click, then I can go to the click event. I have the event open in my properties. I can go to the click event and then choose that one event, and I've chosen it for all these buttons, all of them. So now no matter which one I'm choosing, if I'm choosing this one or this one or this one, it's going to trigger the calculator button click event. Now I need to know which one I've clicked on, which one of these, right? And inside of my object, we have this sender information, sender. So I want to do a debug dot write line. And notice my debug.writeLine did not come up this time, right? Because I'm not using ReSharper. And it says, I don't know what it is, but you need to use using system diagnostics. This is okay. Using system diagnostics, I can go to debug.writeLine and I'll write down the sender dot, and again, it says toString. These are the only ones that you have options to add in. Sender dot toString. Okay, so sender dot toString. What is that? Right, sender dot toString. What does it show me when I click on a button? Any button that's being clicked now, it's going to show me this output, right? So let's try this out and see how it works. One thing to notice is you're not going to get output down here unless you specify what you want to look at. For example, I want to see my debug view, right? So I've got locals, I've got my watch, and I want to look at my my debug output. So my output window, right? So and under debug, there's also windows. And you can see that there's an output window you can ask for. This output window right here. There's my debug. All right, so that was missing. So I went to debug, I went to Windows, I went to output. Okay. Awesome. So now when I run this thing, and here's my output. If I click on this button, then I'm going to get this. It says System Windows.Forms button text 7. So look at that. System Windows Forms button text is 7. 8, 5, U, right? Some weird number, right? And so on, okay? But it says System Windows Form button. It knows the button, right? That's for sure, right? But it gives us some generic output. What other things can we do with the sender? Well, imagine if we know the sender is an object. We don't know what it is, but we know it's an object. But in this case, we know that all the sender objects are buttons. So if I was to say something like button, when I'm making a new object that I'm defining here, button, we're going to call this calculator button. Calculator button. And I want to make it equal to my sender, right? And I want to cast it as a button object, right? That's what I want to do. I want to say, I want to take my sender, and the as, what it does is it downcasts, right, to something called a button. That's what downcasting looks like, right? The as symbol basically casts this sender object, which is just a generic superclass object. We don't know what it is, as a button. Okay, that's different. Now I have different controls on my calculator button. Calculator button dot text, calculator dot button dot name, calculator button dot tag. There's a bunch of them I can go through, right? Let's use calculator button dot name. That's the one I want, and I want to output this to my debug dot write line. So debug dot write line, calculator button dot name. Let's see what that does for me, and this time. So run it. And I'm going to click 7. It's 7 button. 8, it's the 8 button. 9, it's the 9 button. See that? I actually get the name of the button now, right? That's pretty cool. All right, that's good. And I want to get most of the text on here. So I want to say, like, it depends on which button is pressed, right? 7, 8, 9, or whatever, right? Well, if I want my button text to show up, then I can just go text, right? Because that's the button text. But the button text in some of those buttons are weird. But most of the buttons, most of the number buttons, 7, 8, 9, are not weird, right? So these are the buttons, right? So if I get one of these buttons, 7, 8, 9, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 0, right? If I want to get one of these buttons, as long as it's not one of these buttons, right? Or this one, right? Actually, this one's okay, because this one gives it a dot, but this one, not okay, right? Because plus minus, we shouldn't actually see plus minus in here. But if I press any one of these buttons, other than this one and all of these, right? Then I want a different kind of effect. I want a different kind of effect. So if it's not the clear button, if it's not the backspace, which is what this is, right? If it's any one of these buttons here, right, as an example, then you know what? I'm good to go. I'm okay with some of this stuff. And what you can do to make your life easier is what Microsoft gives you an additional piece of or additional things that you can use. So name, notice you can't change the name. The name is actually the name, which is the name of the variable, right? But what you can do here is you can change the tag. Tag can help us, because tag can carry some string information, right? That's what tags do, right? So some kind of user-associated data, it says, right? For example, I could say that all of these buttons are operands, right? Operands, these buttons here with a decimal. And all of these buttons here are operators, right? So that way you can do for sure. All right, so here, let's break this out. So we say all of these buttons, right? Here and here, all of these buttons, not including these ones, they are all operands. Okay, operand. And all of these buttons are operators. So we can change that to operator. Operator buttons. And this is the operand buttons. Hey, I got a way of separating stuff now. I can separate it by tag name. What's the tag that's going to be used here? So let's try this out. Let's go back to our code behind file. And let's do an if statement, right? So I'm going to say, well, if my calculator button dot tag, and by the way, tag, if you look at what it is, it's an object tag, right? So be careful what it says. It says the button tag, right? I want it, if I go like this, right, I can cast it to whatever, but I can say if it's equal to something like operator, right? I can also do a switch case, but let's say if it's equal to operator, and it says, hey, by the way, possible unintended reference, right? It says unintended reference comparison. To get a value comparison, cast the left-hand side to type string, right? So button tag to string, right? If that's equal to operator, then, right, let's do a debug dot write line. We'll say operator. We don't know which one yet, but we know it's an operator. Else, and we don't want else. We want else if here because we want either this or this. Can't do both, right? By accident. Else if this is going to be an operand, right? Then let's say, I'm going to get that space away here. It's an operand. Now you're going to see if else, and you're going to be like, wait, Tom, it's an if else. We can do a ternary operator. Yeah, not really. Not in this case. All right, so let's try that and see how that works. So then, again, looking down here, if I click this, it says operand. If I click this, it becomes operator, and these ones are all operators too. Okay, that's pretty good. So that kind of shows us, proves out that this thing works. By the way, you may be thinking, what is the first thing you want to check? What is the user going to enter more? Is the user going to enter more operands, like numbers, or is the user going to do more operator functions? And I think the user is going to do more operands first than operators. So it's always best to check the most common usage first when we do an if-else. So let's do it the other way around. Let's go operand, operator. Okay? We don't care about this right now. All right, so if this is operand now, when we enter an operand, any operand, we want to modify the result area, which we haven't named. This one here is the result label. We'll call it result label. Okay. We want to modify the result label so that it adds on our number, right? So we're going to say that by default, let's just try this out. We're starting to code the calculator. We're going to say, you know, result label dot text, right, is going to be plus equal to our whatever we get, our sender, you know, as an example, not sender, the calculator button dot text. Whatever the calculator button dot text one added on, and it's going to cause a problem right here, but we're going to get to this in a second. First things first, let's try some simple things, right? So we're ignoring the other stuff, but if it's an operand, we'll then add the text to the calculator to the result label. And if we did this, and if I type the number, you can see that we're doing exactly what it looks like. We're actually adding the text to the result label. We're not doing any calculations as of yet. All we're doing is this. And then you're going to notice there's a problem, because we're going to get to the point where there's more text that we can actually display. That's going to be an issue from a design perspective. Where are all these other numbers? They're gone. What happens in the regular calculator? Remember, we have our regular calculator as a reference to this thing. What happens in the regular calculator? So when I add more values than it can hold, it becomes smaller and smaller. So it actually goes, the text becomes smaller, so it like shrinks to fit, kind of thing, the area that we have in here, right? So if I make it bigger, it shrinks, and so on. Well, that's gonna be an issue later, but that's a design issue. So that means, like, okay, this area here, well, when I get to a certain amount of characters, I'm gonna need to change my font, right? My font size. My font size is 40, but when I span the entire width, I don't know how many nines that's gonna be, as an example, but my font size should go smaller and smaller and smaller so I can fit that large number. I got to be careful, because the larger number I fit, the more calculations I'm going to do. But I should be able to fit that number in. So that's kind of an effect that I want. When the number that's here, the number grows, the text size grows to a certain length, right? Then I want to be able to change the text size to something smaller. And maybe we have to test that. So let's say if I was going to do that, if I said 9, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9, 9, that's probably as big as I want to get. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Once I go beyond 8 characters, then what I want to do is I want to step down my text size to something smaller, right? So step down my text size to a smaller number. And I want to get rid of that 0. Whenever I type in a number for the first time, that 0 disappears, and I replace that 0 with whatever it's going to be. If it's the first number I've added, right? So again, from a logic perspective, I can say, hey, here's the thing I can say, if my current calculator button, my result label, if my result label.text, right now, if it's equal to 0, right, if it's equal to already a 0, then what I want it to do is I want to replace it. So that's the only thing that's in there. I want to replace it with this. Otherwise, do this. Otherwise, plus equal to it, right? So I want to say that if it's only this case, I want to make it equal to my calculator button.text, right? I don't want to add it on. I want to replace it, okay? And this is what happens. If when I add a new button, when I click this button again, if my result label it's an operand, I'm actually entering an operand, and if my size, let's do this thing, is if my toString is already 9, right, or we said 8 or 9. Let's try this out again. Let's make sure that we don't kill it. So again, if I run this thing and I 1, 2, whoa, what happened there? Let's try that again. So I got 2 9s. That was interesting, wasn't it? Well, you know why I got 2 9s the first time? Because I did this, right? So this is where we can use the ternary operator, but we're not going to. We're going to say else here for a second, because we're going to have a bunch of checks. All right, we're not going to just have one check. We're just going to do an else for now. Okay, so it's either this or this for now. 9, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So once it goes beyond 8, if it's already 8, so if before we add another one, if my result label dot text size, right, if it's greater than 7, or we'll say greater than 7. So if it's already 8, then what we should say is, and by the way, we want the size or the count, as an example, to be greater than 7, right? So if my count is greater than 7, so text is a string, right? And normally you have a length which is what I want, if the length is of the text is greater than 7, right? You can also make it equal to 8, whatever you want, exactly equal to 8, right? So example, we say when it's equal to 8, that's it. But we know it's going to be greater than 7. So if it's 8 or 8, or if it's already 8 or larger, so if it's already 8 or more, right? That's what it means. Greater than 7. Then I want to change the font size. Then I want to say that the result label, my result label.text, right? Dot font. I want to change the font of my text. Result label dot font, right, is equal to a new font. And what we want is, again, the font family and the font size. So the font family, again, is going to be the same font family, which right now is Microsoft MS. I think I made it Microsoft Sans Serif. Right. So again, if you ever want to change that, you can always go to if you click on these ellipses here, you can copy Microsoft Sans Serif if you don't know how to spell it, like I don't. And if I go back to here, I can put that in, Microsoft Sans Serif, right? And then my font size is going to be a number, right, in points. I'm going to drop it down to, like, I don't know, 32.0f, right? So it's a floating point number, right? So this is going to make a new font that's this. Else, because if it's not this, if it's not greater, if it's less somehow, let's say someone subtracts from this number and it becomes less, then what I want to make it is that once it goes below that, I want to make it so that it is back to 40. So if it's greater than 7, no problem. If it's anything less than 7 or less, then it's going to be 40. Okay, let's see if that works. So again, go back to here, run it, we're good. If I start typing and I get to the bigger number, then I can see that it's going to go multiple lines, right? Which I don't really want. I want it to keep on going, but that's definitely something we can do. So maybe 32 isn't big enough. Maybe we want to do something like 30 or 26 or 24 or something like that. Let's say make it 26. Let's try that one more time. Because what this will do is if I do this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, then all of a sudden it drops to make it a little bit bigger, right? And we can also make it a maximum size. We can say that, the maximum size this can be is this, don't add any more. It's up to you. You have control of what it adds in there, all right? So again, notice that, making a simple calculator can be really complex. Like, we're just making it add stuff together. That's all we're doing, if it's a 0 or this. So this is kind of interesting. Just controlling how big the numbers are going to be. Okay, now we need an operator. I want an operator if the operator is the clear operator. So now this is where I would go with, so I've got the operator as a tag, but I don't want to have text anymore. I don't want to look at the text. I want to look at the name of the operator, right, which is better. So I'm going to make a switch case, right, where I'm going to switch on the name. What's the name of the operator, right? So it's going to be calculator button dot name, right? And the name is going to be something that I want to switch on, right? So I'm going to say that case the name is, as an example, clear, the clear button, then break, right? Case if it's the backspace button, then break. By the way, I'm just trying to remember what it was for a clear button and it's backspace button, but my naming convention is pretty good, so I know that this is clear button and this is backspace button, right? So I know how I did that, so I'm good. Let's do the clear button first. What does clear button do? It's going to change the result label.text, right? So I'm going to say that result label dot text for now is going to be equal to 0, right? Just going to change it back to 0. And my backspace button, as an example, is going to basically reduce it from the right. So where I added, I want to do some string manipulation, and I want to delete from the right side only. So remember how we can do that. We can create a substring. We can say that to my result label dot text, and we want to now again, there's options for this. If I use the word trim, right, then what it does is it says removes all leading and trailing whitespace characters from my currently string object. Okay, cool. So that's one thing it can't do. I can do a split, right? And what split does is it splits a string into substrings that are based on a character in a characters in an array, right? So I can separate. I can have a separator that splits that. I can also remove, right? And removes a character, as an example, from the string as if it's some kind of object with an index, right? Ooh, this is good, right? I want to remove the last character. All right, what other thing do we have? Do we have like a pop? We don't have pop. We have a remove. We have an add, right? If I want to add, because the string is like a, in some ways, is like a an array or a list, right? So we have a bunch of things we can do with the strings. We can, these are all the different methods that are listed here: length, normalize, and so on. Remove, replace, right? And again, we can spling. We can also make a substring. I can do that too, and all that kind of stuff. But it might just be better for me to, go to the end, right? So I want to text. I want to remove, right, the last character. So I know that my string length is something that I know. So I'm going to say that. Where's the index? So result label dot text dot length. So that's the last character, right? But my length is, my character starts counting at 0. This is going to give me a bigger length. Length, it might be 5, but there's only 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, which means I have to go length minus 1. That's going to be the place I want to get rid of it, right? So I want to remove the last thing from this, from the thing that I put in there. So that's what my removal does. Let's see if this works. So again, I go back, and if I do this, well, that didn't do it. If I do this and I go back, that didn't do it. Clear works, right? Clear works, but this doesn't, right? The back button doesn't work. So is the backspace button even something that's happening? So let's see if that is even triggering. So we can say something like debug dot-writeLine backspace. So we can see that as a debugging process, it's getting there, right? And we can see what's happening here when we do the remove, right? If remove is even working, right? So again, I can, if I click the backspace button, right, when I'm hoping to see backspace, and we do see it, right? Make sure that the letters are spelled the same, backspace, it's working. But the removal isn't working, right? So this work is getting here, but what's happening here is it's trying to remove something. My result label .text.length, that's the index, right? Let's try something simpler. Let's try 0, right? So that is the index, right? Because it looks at, look, give me the index of the thing that I want to remove. Start index, as an example. Returns a new string in which all characters, and this is something else that we have to watch. Let me undo that. If I remove this, it actually does things like, I need to make sure that the result label .text is equal to this new string that's being created. All right, let's try that. I think this is what we need to do. So let's try this again, and if I go backspace, then it kills this. But we don't want to do this if it's just 0. If it's 0, then we want to, if the length is, if I have a number in there and I delete it and there's no more, and the string is empty, then I want to put 0 in there. And if it's 0, don't do this deletion. So okay, so if, it's first thing, if the result label dot text, right, is not equal to 0, right? If it's not equal to 0, then you can do this thing, right? I know, guys, I'm at the end, but I want to try this out. So I'm kind of just working on the UI right now. It's not even doing calculations. Right now we're just working on the UI for the button, for the calculator. And again, by the way, guys, you might when you start thinking, oh, calculator, that's easy to do. I can do a calculator in my sleep time. Okay, here we are. We're doing the calculator, so you can see how challenging it can be to do it right. All right, so this is the only time. If it's not 0, then we can do the backspace. All right, so that means that if I go here and I start, then I can't really do the backspace on a 0, right? But if I do this, then I can do a backspace and it's gone. So that's an issue. So fine, I remove it, and after I remove the length, if the thing is 0, so let's say there's no more length to the string. So if I say my result label, if then afterwards my result label dot text dot length, if that is less than 1, right? So it's 0 or empty. By the way, you could also say you want to make it so that if you're checking for is empty, right? Some kind of empty string, right? You want to compare string to make sure that it's empty, right? You can do that too. Is equal to la la, or you want to check to see if the result label dot I want to check to see if it's empty or no, if it doesn't have anything in it. Dot text, because text has a lot of different things. Dot, and you can see that it says ends with. If I hover over, it says determines whether the end of the string instance matches the specified string. You can kind of check that. You can do remove, and all this kind of stuff that the text allows you to do. Equals is what I want, right? So equals to, and then the object as a string. You can say whatever the string value is, right? So empty. By the way, you can also say string empty, an empty string. That's more specific. I like this more because I might have an empty string that I want to put in here. If it's an empty string, then don't do this operation, right? Replace it with this, right? So now there's another place we put this in there. Right? Result label.text equals 0. We're going to refactor this later. But let's see if that works. So we say that if I do this, it doesn't work. But if I do this and replace it, it goes back to 0, right? So I can do one of these now. And I can backspace, 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 right? To get to 0. Right? So that's really good. But what about this? I can put multiple dots in here. Oh, man. This isn't any good. I can only have ever one of these dots ever in my string as well, right? And the other thing is, if I start off and press a dot, I don't want dot to be in here if it's only a 0. I want it so that if it's a decimal, that it makes it 0 dot, right? And if I delete it, I want it to go back to 0. So that's the other thing we have to worry about. And that's in here, right? So we're saying, okay, if text is greater than 7, it changes the text size. But here we're saying, what happens if the result label text is equal to 0, right? Cool. What happens if the number that I'm getting, the calculator button dot text, whatever this calculator button dot text is, right? What if it's a dot, as an example, right? Don't do this addition more than once if it's already a dot. You know, and we're going to do that next day. We're going to talk about how to fix the decimal. Okay, this is a great place to put it up on GitHub. We've done some work on our calculator, and we've worked with something called a shared event handler. All right, that's what we've done today. So to help us with this this project. All right, so again, I'm going to go to Team Explorer. I'm going to go to Home. I'm going to go to Changes. You're going to see that now I have a couple of changes because I've been working on the code for my form. I'm going to say added simple, clear, and backspace functionality, right? So commit all, home, sync, and push. And that is the end of what we want to talk about today. All right, any questions around this stuff? I know that it's kind of a long process, but you can see what we did. We started by adding a table layout panel, and we modified the rows and columns in order for us to make it kind of like a stretch design with that allows me to stretch into the size of this whole thing. Now this may not work for your BMI calculator because you may not need all these buttons. And also, how are you going to display the results with all these buttons here? Well, you don't need pluses and minuses and all this. These are buttons you could probably save. Same thing with the plus equals. But you're going to need some kind of buttons to kind of pop up, and we'll talk about how to do that in another day, right, if you wanted to get the bonus. Worst case, though, what you could do is you can make your own little plus-minus control. When you click plus and minus, it adds, it aggregates or increments or decrements from your control. So we want to limit, because right now, look, the user cannot enter A, B, C, D in this scenario, right? We've limited the user from input, and this is always a good thing. When we limit the user, they can only do what we allow them to do. Once they start doing other things, then bad things can happen. All right, they can break our code is what I'm saying. Okay, so any other questions around this? Okay, I'm going to stop recording now, and then I'll take some questions. One thing I wanted to remind you guys of is, like I said to you guys before, that we remember that our your assignment number 3 is due this Friday at midnight. If you haven't started now, it's an assignment that needs care, so please make sure you get it, and there will be a video requirement. No video, no marks, so please make sure you get that done. All right, I'm going to stop the stream.